generations and future generations are going to have very distinct challenges, but that be fruitful and multiply, leave and cleave. Come on, let's get it done.
All right, next question. Now, you used to work for an adoption agency, a large adoption agency, and you're an adoptive mom. So this question's from Lucy. She asked, what advice do you have for people who want to adopt?
Mm-hmm. It's amazing to have that instinct to try to feel like I want to bring a child into my home that, for whatever reason, doesn't have the parents in their life that they deserve and that they have a right to. So first of all, that impulse and that instinct is very, very good. But also, we also need to have a child-centric perspective when we think about adoption. A lot of times people think, well, I want to do this because I want to complete my family. I would actually say that's not the right motivation for adoption. Sometimes you're struggling with infertility and you think, well, this is a way for me to have children. I would argue that also is not the right perspective when it comes to adoption. What's going on with adoption? This is especially true for children who are older, children in sibling groups, children with special needs, is they have a burden. And this is true even for newborns, let's be very clear. Those children have suffered loss. Those children have what many adoptees would call a primal wound. Those children are burdened because of the decisions of their first families who couldn't or wouldn't, who didn't feel like they were the best positioned to give the children the life that they deserve, which is their own mother and father raising them together in a married relationship. So that has leveled a burden on these kids. What is adoption? Adoption is your decision to say, I am going to help you bear that burden. I'm going to do whatever I can to try to mend the wound that you have suffered because you are not able to be raised by your first family. Because for whatever reason, through tragedy or irresponsibility, there is no way for you to remain connected with the family, with the parents to whom you have a natural right. And so if you're considering adoption, you need to go into it with that mentality. This is not about me. It's not about having the family that I want or even, a solution for my infertility. Those two things might be true. You might be feeling like you'd like to have more kids or wanting children but unable because of infertility. Still, the dominant mindset must be, this is about them, it's not about us. Jen, what would you add to that?
I love that we've asked the question, whether it's articles or on social media, you've said this, when people say, should same-sex couple, should they adopt, do they have the right to adopt? And we answer, no one has the right to adopt. No adults have the right to adopt. You don't have a right to a child that's not biologically yours. But children have a right to be adopted, right? Every child has a right to their mother and father. And in those cases when that cannot happen, they have a right to a mother and father. And then, if that can't happen, maybe we go down from there and we can argue for those maybe less ideal circumstances where there's still adults who want to sacrifice for kids. But us framing it that way really changed my perspective when it came to adoption as well.
We spent a lot of time talking about adoption in our first book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement. We talk about why adoption is so different from the reproductive technologies that we very often critique on this radio show and in our other articles and social media. And the big difference is because when you properly understand adoption, it really is adults doing hard things on behalf of children. And that absolutely fits the Them Before Us framework. Whereas you look at reproductive technologies and it is forcing children to do hard things on behalf of adults. And so that's why it gets the Them Before Us seal of disapproval. So adoption, when you properly understand it, when you are willing to bear the burden of a child who has been burdened because of the decisions or circumstances that led them to the place of needing adoption, it is altogether good. And it is worthy of your pursuit. But we also want to go into it clear-eyed and understanding that sometimes, we have found in my world of adoption, both as a worker and as a mom, that there are some wounds that may not be filled, that may not be mended on this side of heaven. But that still means that doesn't mean that adoption is bad. It's still absolutely redemptive. But these wounds cut deep, and so you need to go into the adoption process very, very clear-eyed.
That's good. Hey, if anyone has a question for Katie for future radio programs, don't forget you can email us at thembeforeus.com. That's the tricky part with it. But yeah, us@thembeforeus.com. So email us and you can submit a question for Katie. All right, Katie, last question for today from Natasha. She says, I want to get married and have kids. Should I not go to college and not seek out a career?
This is interesting because she has dialed into the truth that I really think, this is what I say when I speak to young women, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. You as a woman are going to have to make some really distinct choices in your life as it relates to fitting in marriage, family, children, career, school. And so you want to think well about that. Now, let's just assume that she has the option to do marriage and family. You know, a lot of times you don't have the choice, right? You can't just magically say, boom, I want to get married right now. Here's this perfect guy. We've got value alignment. We're on the same page. And I have the ability to marry now. That actually is, I would say, much more seldom the case these days than it used to be. These days, dating is hard. It is hard at any age to find somebody that is value aligned, who you want to date in person, and who is ready for marriage earlier rather than later. The default these days is to put off marriage and family for both men and women. And largely the messages, especially that young women are getting, is you should prioritize your career. You can have babies anytime you want. There's no need to get married sooner. Really, you need to focus on getting an education, getting a job, paying off your debt, making your mark in this world, maybe traveling, maybe finding yourself. The problem with that, of course, is that women have a much shorter window for motherhood than men have for fatherhood. And so the messages we're sending to young women actually works against the biological reality of their own bodies, which are primed and ready to make babies, especially in their early 20s, late 20s, and early 30s. And as we heard about in the previous segment with Abby Johnson, turning to these reproductive technologies to try to solve some of the problems of delayed marriage and delayed childbearing means that kids are going to pay the price. And so if you have the ability to prioritize marriage and motherhood first, absolutely, you should take that. Does that mean putting off college? I don't know if it does. I think that you can prioritize marriage and family and still get a great education as an undergrad. But if you have the ability to get married after college and you've got fantastic agreement and consensus with the wise people in your life, your parents, your pastors, and they say, hey, there's no reason for you guys to wait. Think about getting married after college. Think about prioritizing marriage and motherhood sooner rather than later.
I think too, I've heard you say this and some other things I've read, talking about when you are mindful that college can be a great opportunity to meet the people that, good options for dating. I mean, that's probably one of the best opportunities to meet people that are your age that we have these days. But that helps parents and whoever's going to college, so Natasha, be thoughtful about what colleges you're going to. Are you going to find values alignment? Is the college you're going to majority women? I mean, that might be more difficult. That's unfortunately what higher education and especially Christian schools, I think, are trending very female. But if there's intentionality with where you go to school, getting plugged into your faith community, and like you're saying, you're being mindful of keeping an eye out for the people with values alignment. So you're not thinking, I'm going to be totally closed off, never think about it until I get X, Y, and Z career, and then I have to, degree and then career. That's probably a more helpful mindset to go in, to then be open to marriage and family with college and career.
Yeah, I love that. I've got 2 daughters in college. My second one just headed off to a great school that has a close, not quite, but 45% male, 55% female. And she was looking at a college that had 75% female enrollment. I said, you can't apply there. I am not going to allow you to apply to that school. If they're not attracting good men, then to me that's not a college. Like, if college is not offering things that both men and women, then it's not a women's college. But this is your window. This is your chance to find somebody that is value aligned, to find somebody who is ready to do marriage and family and career, and all of the future and everything together. Dating is hard these days. And I'm not saying that there's no hope after college. There obviously is, but this is going to be your best shot at a pool of people that are agreeing with you. And I literally said, you can't apply to that college. This is your chance to find like-minded guys who are on mission with you for the things that you care about in life. The other thing that I communicate to my kids is marriage is not a capstone. It is a cornerstone. It is not the thing that you place on the top of your well-ordered life once you have gone to school, got your degree, got your master's, paid off your debt, bought a house, and then ding, put marriage on the top and everything's fine. No, marriage is a cornerstone. Marriage is one of the things that you're going to do first in life. If possible, again, you don't control all of the factors, but if possible, you do that first. You find somebody that is moving in the same direction, worshiping the same God, aiming towards the same goods that you are. You join your life to them as the cornerstone, and then you start building your life together. That works great with our biology. It works great with the kids. You get some early grandparents thrown in, and hey, it's a sweet deal. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next week at Them Before Us Radio. I'm your host, Katie Faust, and we're so grateful that you give us a portion of your time every week to think about putting them, the children, before us, the adults.
Expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American
90.5 KPFT Greenville, Dallas.
Headlines in USA Today just said this morning. All the odds are against us. Faithfulness is the word.
There's a place for you on the battlefield. Engage in the fight for America's families. Visit ASA.net and then take your position. A message from the American Family Association.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association. This is the Middle East Report, your connection to truthful reporting on Israel and the Middle East. I'm John Riley. Israel continues to face a multi-front war, from Hezbollah to Iran to Gaza. They need our support right now. I want to share with you a commentary from Aaron Free, who's the president of Israel Team Advocates. He's a writer, he's a speaker, and he shared a very familiar biblical story on what we need to do in our support for Israel.
I remember a great story in the Bible. It's David and Goliath. And Goliath was from Gath. Gath is in Gaza. Israel has fought this war before. Goliath is taunting the Jews. Send me a man and to fight me. So Israel was quaking. They were shaking. Saul was shaking in fear of Goliath and the Philistines. And along comes a young shepherd boy, David. He has a burden, and that's where change happens. It always starts with a burden. And David had a burden and said to his brothers, who will take care of this uncircumcised Gentile who is defying the name of the living God? That was his burden. God's name is reproached by the Philistines and by Goliath. And who's going to stand up for the living God? And then that burden turned into a vision. And David had a vision. And he said to Goliath, this day I will remove your head from you. I mean, he's speaking faith of what's going to happen next. He had a vision of the future. This day I will remove your head from you, and I will deliver the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day to the wild beasts of the earth and the fowls of the air, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly will know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear and shield, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver thee into my hand. And so David had a burden. The burden grew into a vision. And then David had a third component, which many people lack today. And I pray that Israel will continue to hold on to this third component, because I believe they've captured this and they've held on to this third principle that many nations right now, maybe even America, they don't have the will to see this through to completion, this war, which is the total destruction of Hamas. And the third component is daring. David had a burden. The burden grew into a vision, and then David had daring. And that's what most people lack, is courage. And David, the Bible says, he ran towards Goliath. He ran to him. That's daring. And that's where a lot of people stop. They have a burden for change. They have a vision for peace in the Middle East. But they don't have the daring to do what it takes to create peace. Because world opinion often gets in the way and hamstrings Israel from fighting its own wars. I pray right now that Israel will continue to be daring. The last several weeks, they've taken out terrorist leaders. They've preemptively struck against Hezbollah in the north, and they're exercising daring. But if their hands are tied by public opinion, then what's going to happen is there's going to be a revitalized Hamas. They will rebuild their tunnels. They will be rebuilt financially. They'll rebuild their military, and there'll be another October 7th. I pray that Israel does not give up on the daring that they exhibited in this war with Hamas.
I want to encourage you to find out more about Aaron Free and Israel Team when you go to israelteam.org. That's israelteam.org. A lot of great information there. That's the Middle East Reports. I'm John Riley. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Tim Moore, Senior Evangelist on Christ in Prophecy. With all the uncertainty in the world today, to know that God's promises never change. On Christ in Prophecy, we'll examine the signs of the times and consider what's really happening in the world today through the lens of God's prophetic word. To hear more biblical hope for the future, join me for Christ in Prophecy, Sundays at 11 a.m. Central, right here on American Family Radio, and find out what's really going on in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, how can you love your neighbor through politics? What? Frank, what are you talking about? That's where we divide politics. No, I'm actually going to talk about, with my guests, how can you love your neighbor through politics? And this is going to be one of a series of programs that we're going to do through the election season, because Christians need to be engaged. We need to know where the candidates stand on the hot moral issues of the day, the hot topics of the day. So we're going to be talking about that. And by the way, next Thursday, the 12th of September, we're going to have Jack Hibbs on, Pastor Jack Hibbs of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, on a live stream, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, on Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, and we're going to be talking about this. How can you love your neighbor through politics? What can your pastor do? What can you do? What are we supposed to do as Christians in this election season and even beyond? So don't forget about next Thursday night. Now, before I go any further, I want to mention that Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Reports, who frequently has proven himself and his organization, Scott Rasmussen actually leads this, and he's from, by the way, my hometown, right near my hometown. My hometown is Neptune, New Jersey, and he's from Asbury Park, Ocean Grove. I actually went to Ocean Grove Middle School. No extra charge for that. But anyway, on the 23rd of August, so just a couple of weeks ago, Mark Mitchell posted this from a survey on the presidential race. Trump is up 33 points among evangelicals. Protestants say they're going to vote for Trump +9. Catholics say they're going to vote for Trump +11. Jewish people, surprisingly, voting for Trump +4. Muslims +17. That's a very small sample, might not be accurate, but here's the interesting thing. Atheists are going for Harris +67. +67, and agnostics or others going for Harris +25. Why is that, ladies and gentlemen? Why are the people claiming to be Christians more going for Trump, and the people claiming to be atheists hugely going for Harris? I submit to you it's because of the moral positions, not of the candidates, they're both morally flawed, but of the policies. And what we're going to look into today are the policies, particularly was Jesus a socialist? And what about some of the pending legislation? We're going to look at some of Kamala Harris's positions today. The pending legislation that she wants to pass if she becomes president. And our two guests are operating under pseudonyms today. The first is Wintry Knight. You may have seen wintrynight.com. It's a great Christian blog site. He's actually a software engineer by day and a Christian apologist by night, and he traces his ancestry back to the West Indies. His mother's family is Muslim, and his father's family is mostly Hindu. He completed his BS and his master's degrees in computer science. He came to the U.S. on a work permit and then became a permanent resident by employer sponsor. He actually did it the right way, ladies and gentlemen. He eventually became a citizen. He's been blogging about Christian apologetics and public policy since 2009, and he co-hosts the Knight and Rose Show with our other guest. Her name is Desert Rose. She's also a Christian apologist. She's the founder of An Affair with Reason, and she serves as senior writer, Islam ministry specialist, and secretary of the board for women in apologetics. She's graduated from Duke University, so she's a blue devil, watch out. She's got a bachelor's degree in public policy, and she became concerned with the practical impact that government policies have on people after she became a Christian at age 21. She's seen the real impact of bad policy on people's lives all over the world, and she's ministered in over 25 countries on 5 continents. She's also a graduate of Denver Seminary, and right now she's working on her doctorate of ministry in apologetics at Birmingham Theological Seminary. Let me start with Desert Rose. Desert, we did a podcast with you and Wintry Knight, I don't know, several months ago, and we thought it would be a great time to have you back on to talk about the policy positions of the candidates. So, tell us again, how you got interested in this, in Christians and culture. How did that happen?
Well, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and I wasn't really conservative people at all, to be honest. I was all about me and my goals and my accomplishments and that sort of thing. But my family was also always very interested in politics and policy. It was kind of, something that was important to my parents, my grandparents. It would come up all the time. And it interested me as well. And so I decided to major in public policy studies at Duke. Duke was an interesting time. I was in an environment of absolute relativism, and my professors all had the intentional desire to make sure that we were all relativists, that we didn't hold to any sort of absolute or objective values. And I was living in that environment all around me with the way people were behaving, and that really got my attention. I started trying to think clearly about things. As they were pushing absolute relativism, they were also pushing critical thinking skills. So as you know, the two don't go so well together. And in that environment, I became a follower of Jesus, and I really started to care about people at that time, and to care about the impact of the policies that I had studied, and not just caring about my career or what I could benefit from policy.
And you've seen the socialism. We're going to talk about socialism. You've seen it firsthand in some of the countries you've been to. We'll get back to that. Wintry, let me come to you. How did you become a Christian, largely coming from a Muslim and Hindu family?
Yes, thanks, Frank. I received a New Testament from the Gideons when I was still in public school in the country where I'm from, and I read it cover to cover, and then I read it cover to cover again, and I had kind of a good time testing out if what the Bible was saying was true, and I found that it really described the condition of my own heart, as well as the behaviors that I was seeing around me from the teachers and the students. So I carried that forward, into high school, and began to get a reputation for being able to answer tough questions as I was reading C.S. Lewis and William Lane Craig and people like that. And then I just kept going with it, answering more and more questions on into college. And finally, that turned into a study of how the Christian worldview touches on these topics that we're going to talk about today, morality and policy and things like that.
Excellent. Let me start with the question about socialism, Rose. First of all, what is socialism? Can you give us kind of a broad definition of it?
Yeah, socialism is essentially when the means of production are owned by, in theory, the community. In practice, it's the government, right? So the businesses, clinics, healthcare system, grocery stores, things like this are owned. The businesses and everything you need to run a business, the property for it, the computers for it, whatever you might need, it is not owned by individuals or families. Rather, as the theory goes, it's owned by the community. But in reality, nobody is going to work their butts off to make a business run, to make decisions about it, to serve people when there's no personal benefit from it. So the government inevitably has to step in and take over if individuals are not going to have any incentive to produce for their own benefit or for the benefit of their family, to feed their family. And so what we see is government making decisions about what people need instead of supply and demand. You know, in a free market, people make choices voluntarily. They know what they want and they seek out what they want. And businesses and people who want to pay the bills for their family, give to their church, this sort of thing, they produce what people are wanting. And so it's a supply and demand that determines kind of what is available, what is purchased. Whereas under a socialist system, you're going to have a few elites within the government deciding how much of each thing to produce. And so it's voluntary versus government run is kind of a distinguishing difference between the two.
Now, doesn't the Bible, particularly in the book of Acts, say that they didn't claim private ownership and they seemed to live like in a commune? What do we have to say about that? Does the Bible teach this? We're going to talk about it right after the break. Don't go anywhere. Back in 2 minutes.
The words you are about to hear are taken from letters sent in by members to the Trinity Debt Management Program.
Dear Trinity, today I'm making my final credit card payment.
Before I came to you, I was in a constant state of anxiety and panic, but now there is hope for my family's financial future.
Working with Trinity made me understand that I'm not alone.
You really do help people.
Your kindness will never be forgotten.
Without Trinity support, I would not have achieved my lifelong goal of becoming debt-free.
We saved a lot on interest and penalties, of course, but the reward was the gift of human kindness.
Trinity has carried me through a very difficult time in my life. You're amazing.
I used to feel so anxious and hopeless. Now I feel grace and peace.
God bless Trinity as you continue to help others become debt-free.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
Here's Dr. John Oswalt from the American Family Studios documentary, The God Who Speaks.
We are inveterate idolaters. We inveterately attempt to find means within the cosmos where we can achieve our goals, where we can control God for our purposes. And it's astonishing the ways in which we do it. When the Old Testament spends so much time attacking idols, we often think, well, I don't have any idols. I don't have any little statues in my closet. I don't pray to some god or something. But idolatry is really the attempt to manipulate the divine through my own efforts. That's what idolatry is.
Visit thegodwhospeaks.org.
Was Jesus a socialist? What is socialism? Does the Bible teach it? Because if you read the book of Acts, particularly chapter 2 and chapter 4, it sure does seem like they're living in some sort of commune. Let me just read a passage here from Acts chapter 4, beginning in verse 32. It says, "Now the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses, sold them, and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as they had need. Well, this sure seems like socialism right here. What do we have to say about it? I have two guests today, and we're talking today about politics and how to love your neighbor through politics. One is Wintry Night, the other is Desert Rose. Let me go back to you, Wintry Night. What would you say about this passage in Acts chapter 4? Is this particular passage teaching and prescribing some sort of communism or socialism?
So I think the important thing to realize about how socialism is implemented today in countries that have adopted it is that it isn't based on voluntary giving and voluntary sharing and charity. In fact, if you take a look at the statistics, secular leftists tend to be some of the least generous givers in terms of charity. So what you see in the New Testament is a group of believers voluntarily sharing. So that we would class that as charity. So this is money that they earn themselves, and they're looking at the needs of their community and they're sharing. But socialism, as it looks in a country like, say, Venezuela or Cuba or North Korea, is gonna be similar to what Rose is saying, where a lot of the industry is going to be owned by the state, and the people will work at those jobs, and then maybe the government will decide how much they're paid. And unless you think that's kind of a far-fetched thing, just think about like minimum wage laws or rent control. These are policies where the government steps in and says, you cannot charge someone more for rent than this, and you cannot pay someone less than this. So that those kinds of things can lead to unforeseen consequences, and maybe we'll talk about that more later. It sounds like it's good, but it is the government coming in and restricting how we're going to trade labor and goods and services.
Rose, what do you say about this passage? Wintry's saying, well, the government's not involved at all. It's all voluntary. It's all charity. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the most important point, because that is really the difference between a free market economy versus a socialist economy where it was voluntary. But also, I'll just go ahead and mention, we see what else is happening in this community from the context. And so we know from Acts chapter 2, for example, that these were all believers who were meeting together regularly. They were committed to the truth. They were living the way Jesus had commanded, the way they were taught. So, like, for example, the Apostle Paul said that he was not willing to work, shall not eat. In 1 Corinthians 5, we read that people who put their own sexual preferences, for example, above the teachings of Jesus, are to be put out of the church. And so this is a group of believers who are giving to one another to provide for one another in an environment of tremendous accountability. And that accountability is absolutely huge. If government is going to be sending money to people without accountability, who are just living however they want, they're actually incentivizing more and more and more unbiblical behavior that is going to cause more problems and more need for welfare. Whereas within the community of believers, living the way Jesus taught, providing for one another with accountability within the community is actually going to produce excellent results. It's going to meet people's needs. But with that accountability that is necessary to help people make the best decisions.
Yeah, actually, I think we also need to keep in mind that the book of Acts is a book of, also known as the book of the activities. Book of Acts is mostly a description. It's not a prescription.
Right.
I mean, there are places where they make speeches that are prescriptive, but most of the time it's just a description. Here is what they did, and Luke is just describing what they did. It's not necessarily a prescription for everybody, although charity is a prescription.
Right.
But God says through Paul that God just loves a cheerful giver. He's not saying that you have to give up all of your possessions in a commune somehow. And the Bible, of course, presupposes private property. Thou shalt not steal presupposes that you have private property for yourself. So just because you can find Christians living this way they're doing so voluntarily for a short period of time. It was a unique event that is never commanded to be the norm elsewhere. Also, I like that you brought up this point, Rose, and maybe I can throw it back to Wintry as well, that Paul talks about people who are able-bodied but don't work. He says in 2 Thessalonians 3, I think it is,
yes.
I'd have to look it up. He says anybody who is in this condition and doesn't work doesn't eat. And it seems to me that would be a benefit to everybody, because as Rose just said, you don't want to get people dependent and you don't want to feed their idleness. Sure, we can have a safety net for people that can't work. For people that can and won't, the last thing you want to do is make them dependent on other people. There's a free rider problem there, and it doesn't help the individual. You're enabling him to be lazy. Any comment on that, Wintry?
Yeah, one quick comment. I think that if you think about the specific kinds of welfare programs that we have, in America, for example, it seems to me that if a person has children, say, out of wedlock, I think you receive welfare for having those children. But if you get married, you can lose those benefits because there's enough income coming into the home. So you're creating kind of, like you said, a moral hazard there, which is encouraging people to make the wrong decisions and not provide children with what they need going forward. And that can cause problems for us later if those children fail to become, educated and independent because they don't have two parents in the home. But I will say one other thing. I think whenever you think about a Christian taxpayer, suppose I earn $100 and it's my money to spend. Well, that money could go to, crossexamine.org, or it could go to, other ministries that are making a difference. But if that money is taxed by the government and spent by, say, Kamala Harris, you may not see that money go to the same places that you might like it to go to. So, your money is your voice, and you want to be careful about how you let people who don't share your worldview spend that money on the things that they think are important. You might not agree with them.
Now, how much, quite obviously, neither party believes in a total government takeover of business, right? I mean, come on. Even the Democrat socialist countries of Scandinavia don't have complete government control, but how different are the parties on this? Say the Republican platform and the Democrat platform. Do you guys have any sense of how far socialism would be pushed by the Democrats or the Republicans? It would seem obviously the Democrats would push that more. Is it universal health care? I think I saw in their platform they want that. What would be the problem with that? Let's go to Rose on that. What do you think of that, Rose? Is that a problem?
Yeah,
universal health care, everyone seems like, hey, we want it, but there's a problem with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are several huge problems with it. First of all, it eliminates competition, and competition keeps prices down. It incentivizes people to meet needs, again, by serving others. And so, for example, if a young person is in medical school or wanting to go to medical school, deciding what kind of doctor to become, and there's plenty of information on what is needed out there. And so someone might say, oh, well, heart surgeons are in great demand, and I'm at the top of my class. I can do that. I have steady hands. I have a brilliant mind. I'm going to do heart surgery. Then that's what's needed, and so that need is going to be filled by people who are willing and able to step in and fill that need. If there is a need for people to treat cancer, then those kind of doctors are going to be produced because people want to make a living. They want to be able to provide for their families, give generously if they're Christians, and that sort of thing. We have seen, WK and I have a friend from the UK who was diagnosed with cancer and just sat laid in her room screaming and crying and calling WK for help for 6 months before she was able to see somebody. She tried to go to the ER. They said, go home, stop coming back. We can't give anything to you.
This was where, Rose? What country?
Scotland.
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 Yeah, because they were prioritizing. The government had prioritized breast implant enlargement surgeries, transgender surgeries, and this sort of thing. So there were plenty of doctors for that. You could get that next week. But sorry, you're 50 years old and you have cancer, go home. We don't have anything for you. Please stop coming to the ER. And she died of a very, very treatable cancer. In the US, she would have been fine. And so what we see is massive shortages in everywhere. There is this single payer system in Canada. WK has done a lot more research on Canada as well. He can talk about that. There are
WK's Wintry Night, so jump in, Wintry, go.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say quickly about my friend Dina from Scotland. I think about her almost every day, every other day, and it was just terrible how, you know, they kind of let things slide for a long, long time before it was too late to give her proper treatment. So regarding Canada, you know, whenever you're looking at these policies and evaluating candidates for an election, here's what I recommend. I think you should go back and look at the policies or that these people have, the candidates have supported previously, and look at their actions, because that really indicates what they would do more than their words during an election campaign. And I think that people need to look at how the policies that the candidates want have worked out in other countries. So one of these policies is Kamala Harris's support for Medicare for all. And she just means that the government is going to act as a single payer for all the treatment, healthcare treatment that you get. Well, lucky for us, we have a system that exists in Canada right now that is single payer, and it's been there for a long time. So you can take a look at how that's going. So whenever I want to know how things are going with Canada's healthcare system, I always turn to the Fraser Institute, which is kind of a libertarian think tank where they collect up all the government statistics and evaluate how things are going and what changes the government might make to make things work better. So I want to read two quick things. Well, I'll paraphrase them, but I have the links, and if we have show notes, I can put them in there.
Yeah, hold the thought, Wintry, because we're coming up to a break. And right after the break, we're going to get into that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we're going to look, there's three things in healthcare: universal access, high quality, and low cost. It turns out you can't get all three. So what do you do? We'll talk about it right after the break. My guests, Wintry Night and Desert Rose. And we're going to be back in just 2 minutes. We're talking about so many important issues. Don't go anywhere.
Danny, the baby just rolled over for the first time. Oh, what a strong little boy.
That a boy, son. You're on your way.
Oh, who's my strong little man?
Rollovers can be milestones in life, some early on and some later. One rollover you might consider is from your individual retirement account to a charitable gift annuity with the AFA Foundation. If you'd like to increase your retirement income and leave an impactful gift to the Work of American Family Association, the charitable gift annuity is a worthwhile option. To learn more, contact the AFA Foundation at 800-326-4543, extension 345, or email foundation@afa.net. If you own an IRA, would like to increase your charitable giving, but need retirement income, the IRA to CGA rollover may be for you. Call the AFA Foundation at 800-326-4543, extension 345.
Can you be gay and Christian? What if you genuinely feel like you're trapped in the wrong body? Did God make you this way? Is change even possible?
Dr. Michael Brown.
Countless people ask me these very same questions. Some of them quite desperate, many of them in tears.
Would you be ready to give a godly answer?
Each one represents a person or family member or loved one who's struggling deeply with their core identity.
Satan wants to deceive and destroy God's truth.
So we know that what this gay affirming agenda within the church is doing is it's fragmenting scripture, it's dumbing down the Bible.
And infiltrate the church with his lies. In his image, clearly and compassionately presents God's truth through Bible teaching, science, and the testimonies of those who know both sides.
My dad walked in the door and he said, "Denise, I want to talk with you." And the first words out of his mouth were, "I want to become a woman."
Get the 2 DVD set at resources.afa.net. resources.afa.net.
If you're low on the FM dial looking for National Public Radio, go no further. We're actually going to tell you the truth here. That's our intent anyway. You're listening to I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist on the American Family Radio Network. My name is Frank Turek. We have two guests today, Wintry Night and Desert Rose. And before I get back to them, I want to mention if you're listening to this on Friday, September 6th, tonight I'll be with my friend Charlie Kirk and Robert Farrow at Calvary Chapel, Tucson. If you're anywhere in Calvary Chapel, Tucson, we're going to be talking about the issue of abortion and voting in this coming election. What's it all about? Then, Lord willing, I will be at Arizona State University on Monday night, September 9th. All the details on the website, and you can also watch that streaming live. The following week, we will be at Western Carolina University. That's the 18th of September. And then on the 21st, we're going to be at a church in Buffalo, New York, doing Unshaken with my friend Elisa Childers and Natasha Crane. Go to unshakenconference.com for tickets to that. But then we have several other colleges in Louisiana coming up the week after, all on our website. Now, Desert Rose mentioned at the top of the program, she was brought up as a relativist, but then studied logic and realized it didn't work. Well, we have a great logic course called Train Your Brain. It's starting this week, and if you're listening to it after this week, you can still, actually next week, it starts September 9th, but you can still join afterwards. There's a 6th to 8th grade course version of it, and then there's a version for everybody else. It'll be Shanda Fulbright and myself teaching that. And then for you high school and college students, I will be your instructor for why I still don't have enough faith to be an atheist, starting next week as well. So if you want to learn apologetics, I'll be your instructor. We'll have several live Q&A Zoom sessions. Go to crossexamine.org, click on online courses. You will see it there. Now, before the break, wintry night, we were talking about the success or lack of success of universal health care in Canada. Pick it up right there.
All right, so I have the latest numbers from the Fraser Institute, which is a libertarian think tank based in Canada. So this is from August 20th, 2024, and the title is The Price of Public Healthcare Insurance. And basically, in 2024, an average Canadian family consisting of 2 adults and 2 children will pay $17,713 in taxes. Now that's Canadian dollars, so it's about $13,000 US for public healthcare insurance. So that comes out of their taxes in order to gain access to this healthcare system. There is no direct route to private healthcare in Canada. You have to, bill it to the government when you go. So that doesn't seem like it's very cheap to me, at least compared with my American, medical health insurance that I'm paying for. And then the second thing is the wait times, because when you make something free, you're making the price very low, and that can create a lot of demand. And if the supply is not there, perhaps because doctors are leaving the country to be able to make money in different countries like America that let them keep more of what they earn, then you have a shortage of doctors, but a huge demand for this free healthcare. So that can create a shortage. And then the way that it expresses itself in Canada is with wait times. So this is what the Fraser Institute says in this article called Waiting Your Turn, Wait Times for Healthcare in Canada, which is from December 7th, 2023. It says, in 2023, physicians report a median wait time of 27.7 weeks between a referral from a general practitioner and receipt of treatment. So I don't know about you, but when I needed my MRI, I was able to get it the next week. But if I'm in Canada, it could be 6 to 7 months, depending on what province you're in. So I don't know that we want to, follow in the system and make these mistakes.
No, yeah, we certainly don't. And if we do, then we're going to kill the golden goose of innovation, because America creates many, if not probably a majority of the advances we make medically, because there is a profit motive and because there's the free market. If you kill that golden goose, then the entire healthcare system around the world is going to be hurt, because there's not as much incentive to try and improve healthcare. Now, I think we do need to clear something up. We already have universal access here in America. Nobody can be denied health care if they go to an emergency room. But if we try and make everything under some sort of government system, it's going to be a disaster for health care, because it's been proven elsewhere, as you've pointed out there, Wintry Night, with regard to Canada. Now, Rose, you've seen socialism up close and personal in some of the countries in which you've ministered. Give us a taste of what socialism is like in other countries.
Well, people will not even attempt to go to a doctor for something like major panic attacks because they know that they're not going to be able to see a doctor for a year, 2 years. They might get on a wait list, but they're more likely to start doing illegal drugs to alleviate their suffering. They know they can't see a doctor. If they are able to somehow get in to see a doctor, they expect to be treated really poorly because there is no competition. There's nobody else to go to. You can't just say, wow, my doctor has terrible bedside manner, was just horrible to me, and messed up the last surgery he did, or has messed up the last 30 surgeries he's done, and so I'll just go to another doctor. Well, that's not a choice, because you go to who you're allowed to go to when you're allowed to go to them. And so this also causes the disintegration of the quality of care as well. I've seen this firsthand in various countries, and read about it in even more countries. And so, there are a lot of people who fly to the U.S. to get care because they can just pay for them themselves, even though it's very, very expensive. At least their lives could be saved in the U.S., or they can get the surgeries that they need or the medicine they need. If that's no longer an option in the U.S., it's actually going to make things a lot worse for a lot of other people around the world because they won't be able to come here anymore.
Wintry, I want to get your comment on this. A friend of mine, Neil Mauman, wrote a book about Christians being involved in politics. He says Jesus was involved. Why aren't you in your church? And he said this about socialism. He said socialism depends on people working as much as they can and only taking as little as they need. Yet in reality, human nature is such that we work as little as we need and take as much as we can. So it seems to me what Neil is saying here, and I think he's right, is that anybody that puts forth socialism as a solution to economic problems doesn't understand human nature. They have the wrong view of human nature. What do you think about this?
Yeah, that's a great topic. I think that people really misunderstand this. The political left advocates for socialism, they tend to present their view as the compassionate view, and they want, this is how they present it. But what people need to remember is that having good intentions does not always create good results. And so the realistic view of human nature is that people will work harder when they get to keep more of the proceeds of their work. And so I think it was economist Adam Smith who said that it's not out of the kindness of their hearts that butchers and bakers and all these other people get up and go to work. It's because they can make money by supplying for the needs. So what capitalism does, or the free market system does, is it says, would you like to be wealthy? If you do, then you can be wealthy by giving people around you value for their dollars. You can give them the lower cost items that have higher quality